Hello, National Action Network conference participants, organizers, and attendees. Thank you for having me here today for this amazing conference. I'm excited to continue the work of voter protection in the South. Because of years of hard work and national collaboration, we have finally seen Georgia for what she is. She's blue, y'all, but we've only just begun. We have so much more work to do, especially in our state and local politics. 2022 is just around the corner. The state house, state senate, labor commissioner, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, and governorship are all up for election. 2020 was out of control, and in 2021, they're trying it. It's long and it's hard as certain lawmakers want to make it even harder to vote. So we must be more vigilant than ever. We have had to do what we've been doing, outvote the voter suppression. If they're going to restrict our vote, we will turn out the vote even harder. If they're going to prohibit us from giving out snacks and water to friends and families in line, we're going to make sure they come into the polling place with those items. If they're going to put rules that are slanted, we are going to learn those rules and continue winning to undo them. We know they don't want us to vote, so what do? We fight back harder, like we've always done. Voter suppression is not new in Georgia. We've dealt with this before, and we can do it again. I believe that every vote counts. We need to make sure we care about races up and down the ballot. The governorship is crucial, but so is the labor commissioner. Secretary of State is vital, but so is each and every state house seat. Georgia's congressional seats are essential, but so is our local county commissioner. In last year's presidential election in Georgia, President Biden won in 85 state house districts, but only 77 of those house candidates won. It's called down ballot drop-off, and it's a real thing. We've got to give our local politics the same love and intention as the top of the ticket. I learned this personally in my first race in 2016. I could have avoided a runoff if 23 more people voted in my election. That runoff cut into time. I could have been fighting and working in the legislature. So truly, every vote counts. I ran for this seat because I represent what's lacking at the Georgia State Capitol. Women are dramatically underrepresented. We make up 54% of the state's population, but only 23% of the elected officials. The statistics involving African American women are even less hopeful. So, access to the ballot, access to healthcare, and access to education were and are still under partisan attack due to partisan politics. So Medicaid expansion and budget cut conversations are what I had to step up to run for, to represent when a vacated seat became open in 2016. Once I became a legislator, it felt like our team of millennials was thrown into an alternate reality, ruled by callous people who were out of touch with reality. As a young Black progressive, it can be a bit hard to fit in, and I like to tell it how it is down at the Gold Dome, and that doesn't always go so well. You might have heard of a little story about me knocking on a door in the past 2 weeks. I want you to know I knocked because it's my job to be in the room where bills are signed. As the caucus secretary, it's my job to be present and inform members of the legislative happenings, no matter how irregular they are. I want to be clear. Now is the time for all organizations and individuals around the state of Georgia to double down and make sure voters understand the new law impacting voting, Senate Bill 202, because as terrible and suppressive as its 98 pages are, it is the law. We cannot afford to lose gains we are making. So until we have changed the new law, by lawsuit or injunction, we have to make sure we understand the new law. I want to take time to thank God and my family for his grace. That's why I can stand here today, and for their support. After what has felt like the 2 longest weeks of my life, I stand here now free from the threat of 8 years in prison for simply doing my job. I'm thankful to District Attorney Fonnie Willis and the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for the thorough and complete investigation of the facts that led to the dismissal of the felony charges I faced. I want to thank supporters nationwide who have reached out to me from every state with concern, appreciation, and solidarity for what we have done. Thank you for the cards, the texts, the emails, the social media postings, the contributions. The outpouring has provided for my physical safety and our continued work during one of the most challenging periods of my life. But today, I come here to tell you it's time to lean in. The joy that I feel for the dismissal of the charges that I faced is tempered by the fact that I should have never been arrested in the first place. 2 weeks ago, Brian Kemp sat in his office surrounded by a group of good old boys and signed into law one of the most racist pieces of legislation in my lifetime. To emphasize the weight of this act, they strategically positioned themselves under a disgraceful painting of a South Georgia plantation to remind the world of their commitment to apartheid. This very act was equivalent to taking a noose and placing it around the neck of not one Georgian who's black or brown, but taking nooses and putting them around the necks of all 5 million black and brown people, all being lynched at one time with one stroke of a pen. Looking back over the events of that day, I realized the intentionality of Kemp and his lynchmen, with his pen in hand and his lynchman by his side, positioned under a symbol of oppression. Georgia lawmen posed for the camera as they took a bold step back, taking Georgia back to the days of Jim Crow. Brian Kemp began to dismantle everything Black people in America have achieved, earned, and worked for since arriving at the port of Savannah. This display of white power and white privilege discriminated against our community and was demonstrated by public servants. It was an affront to the lives and sacrifices of all of the men and women who have fought and who are fighting for our freedom. We should not sit quietly while white men behind closed doors work to preserve their white power and white privilege. I won't do it. We can't do it. And 2 weeks ago, I didn't do it. Shortly after the session adjourned for the week, as most lawmakers rushed away to their cars to get home, a small group of 6 white lynchmen hung back and slipped into the governor's office. The Capitol was nearly empty. I received a message that the governor was signing the voter suppression legislation into law. As the secretary of the Democratic caucus, I did as I always do, and I reached out via group text to as many of my colleagues as possible, walked down to the governor's office and wanted to be in the room. I wanted to be in the room as the men placed the nooses around our necks. I wanted Kemp to have to remember my face and see the pain, the disappointment, and the contempt I had for this insidious act of betrayal against Georgia's citizens. So I knocked on the door in my place of employment. I knocked on the door where my colleagues had gathered to do the very thing that I wanted to see, albeit for different reasons. I too wanted to be in the room. So I knocked on the door. I was not disruptive. I was persistent. I knocked on the door. I saw the faces of the family members who showed up at the Capitol before the sunrise and after the sunset, voicing their concerns on the bill. So I knocked on the door. I remembered the Georgians and the allies from around other states who stood in the rain to protect the rights of all voters. So I knocked on the door. I knocked on the door because I remembered all of the lives we have lost because of racist elected officials who ignore our rights. So I knocked on the door so that Governor Brian Kemp would have to see me and all that I represent. So I knocked on the door, and today I vow to you that I will keep knocking. Georgia will keep knocking. America, keep knocking. Thank you.